The champagne glasses clinked around the table, and laughter filled the private dining room. My parents sat at the head of the table, smiling as relatives toasted their 40 years of marriage. The Silver Elm restaurant glowed with candlelight and expensive decorations. Then my brother Evan stood up, raising his glass with that familiar smirk. "To Mom and Dad," he began, his voice carrying across the room. "And to family who actually contribute to society, not waste their lives on failed little cafes." The laughter that followed felt like needles. I forced a smile, gripping my napkin under the table. My mother glanced at me uncomfortably but said nothing. My father cleared his throat. Evan's wife giggled beside him. Then Sam, one of the waiters, approached our table with a wine bottle. He leaned toward me politely. "Ms. Carter, would you like me to bring your manager's report now, or should I wait until after dinner?" The entire table went silent. Forks stopped midair. Evan's grin froze on his face. My mother frowned in confusion, looking between Sam and me. I met Evan's eyes and smiled softly. "After dinner is fine, Sam." "Thank you." 2 years earlier, my life looked completely different. I worked as an accountant at a firm downtown, staring at spreadsheets for 12 hours a day. The fluorescent lights gave me headaches. The office politics drained my soul. Every morning, I felt like I was drowning. One Tuesday, I handed in my resignation. My boss looked shocked. My coworkers whispered. Evan called me that evening, laughing into the phone. "You quit your stable job to do what exactly?" he asked. "I'm opening a cafe," I told him. "Something small. Community-focused." He laughed harder. "A cafe? Lauren, you're 35 years old. This is a midlife crisis, not a business plan." I ignored him and signed the lease on a small corner property the next week. The space needed work, cracked tiles, outdated plumbing, peeling paint. But I saw potential. I named it the Willow House Cafe. The first 3 months were brutal. I worked 16-hour days, scrubbing floors, learning equipment, perfecting recipes. My savings disappeared quickly. That Thanksgiving, I made the mistake of attending the family dinner. Evan arrived in his expensive suit, bragging about his latest promotion. His wife wore designer clothes and talked about their vacation to Europe. When someone asked about my cafe, Evan laughed loudly. "Oh, Lauren's little hobby shop? How's that going, sis?" The table went quiet. I felt my face burn. "It's going well," I said carefully. "We're building a customer base." "A customer base," Evan repeated, grinning at his wife. "That's cute. She's playing business owner." My mother changed the subject quickly. My father looked uncomfortable but said nothing. I excused myself early, claiming I had to prep for the morning shift. As I gathered my coat, I overheard Evan whispering to our father in the hallway. "She's not built for business, Dad. She'll crawl back to accounting eventually. You watch." I drove home with tears blurring the highway lights. One rainy November evening, when the cafe was nearly empty, an older gentleman walked in. He wore a simple gray coat and carried an umbrella. He ordered black coffee and sat by the window, watching the storm. I wiped down tables nearby, and we started talking. He asked about my vision for the cafe. I told him about wanting to create a community space, somewhere people felt welcome and connected. He listened carefully, nodding occasionally. His questions were thoughtful, interested. It felt good to talk to someone who didn't dismiss my dreams. When he left, he handed me his business card. "Mr. Jennings," it read. "Jennings Development Group." I thanked him, not thinking much of it. Only later did I search his name online and realize he owned half the commercial properties downtown. My hands shook as I read article after article about his real estate empire. Why had someone so successful spent an hour talking to me? 3 weeks later, Mr. Jennings called me. My heart pounded as I answered. "Ms. Carter, I've been thinking about our conversation," he said. "I have a struggling restaurant property nearby. Would you be interested in managing it? Possibly expanding into a partnership? I almost dropped the phone. Me? Why me? Because you understand what makes a place matter to people, he replied. That's rarer than you think. The opportunity was risky. The restaurant had been failing for months. But I was desperate, and something about his confidence in me sparked hope. I agreed. The first day I walked into the restaurant's kitchen, my hope wavered. The space was chaos, broken equipment, unwashed dishes piled everywhere, spoiled food in the walk-in. 2 staff members were arguing loudly. Others had already quit. I stood in the middle of the disaster, wondering what I'd agreed to. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. For the next 2 weeks, I scrubbed every surface, organized inventory, interviewed new staff, and rebuilt supplier relationships. I worked until midnight most nights, then opened the cafe at dawn. The remaining kitchen staff watched me skeptically at first. But slowly, as they saw me working alongside them, not above them, their attitudes shifted. One afternoon, while reorganizing the storage room, I overheard 2 chefs talking in the hallway. The old boss says the new manager won't last a month, one said. She's tougher than she looks, the other replied. I think she might surprise him. I smiled to myself and kept working. Let them doubt. I'd prove myself through actions, not words. Within a month, the restaurant started functioning smoothly. Equipment was repaired. Staff showed up on time. The kitchen ran efficiently. Mr. Jennings visited one afternoon and walked through the space, nodding approvingly. I introduced new menu items, seasonal specials using local ingredients, homemade pastries I baked myself each morning. The response was immediate. Customers who'd stopped coming began returning. Word spread. Reviews improved. The staff started trusting my decisions. When I suggested we host a community dinner once a month for local families, they supported the idea enthusiastically. 6 months later, Mr. Jennings invited me to his office. He sat behind a massive desk, smiling warmly. You've exceeded every expectation, Ms. Carter, he said. The restaurant is profitable again. More importantly, it has heart. He slid a folder across the desk. I'm offering you an ownership share. If profits continue rising for 6 more months, you'll own 30%. I stared at the contract, hardly breathing. This was real. This was happening. I signed immediately. Not everything went smoothly. One morning, a supplier delivered completely spoiled produce, rotten vegetables, expired dairy, moldy bread. The delivery driver claimed it was all they had. I called the supplier, furious. The manager seemed unconcerned, almost amused. Later, my head chef pulled me aside. That supplier is owned by Marcus Webb, he said carefully. He runs the bistro on 5th Street. I heard he's friends with some guy named Evan. My stomach dropped. Marcus Webb had gone to college with my brother. The next day, a health inspector showed up unannounced. My staff panicked, but I remained calm. I'd been meticulous about records, cleanliness, and safety protocols. The inspector walked through every room, checking everything. Finally, he closed his notebook. Everything's in order, he said, sounding almost disappointed. That evening, I called Evan. Thanks for the recommendation, I said sweetly. He went silent. What recommendation? Never mind, I replied. Have a good evening. Over the next months, the restaurant thrived. Revenue climbed steadily. Staff morale was high. Customers became regulars, bringing friends and family. I stopped worrying about failing and started planning expansion. Mr. Jennings visited often, always pleased with the progress. One spring afternoon, he sat across from me in the dining room, looking tired but content. I'm thinking about retirement, he said quietly. My children have their own careers. They're not interested in restaurants. He paused, watching my reaction. I'd like you to take over full ownership, Ms. Carter. You've earned it. I couldn't speak. Tears blurred my vision. This man, who barely knew me, was trusting me with his legacy. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Say yes, he smiled. I did. The paperwork took weeks, but eventually, everything was official. I owned the Silver Elm restaurant. I told no one in my family. 3 months later, an invitation arrived in the mail. My parents' 40th anniversary party. The location made me pause, the Silver Elm restaurant. I called my mother, who explained that Evan had insisted on hosting it there. He says it's the nicest place in town, she said proudly. He's paying for everything. I smiled to myself. That's generous of him. Will you come, sweetheart? She asked. I know things have been tense with your brother, but it would mean so much to your father and me. I'll be there, I promised. That afternoon, Mr. Jennings called me, chuckling. I heard your brother booked the Silver Elm for a party, he said. Does he know you own it now? Not yet, I replied. Going to tell him beforehand? I considered it. No. I think I'll let him figure it out himself. Mr. Jennings laughed. You're learning, Miss Carter. The week before the party, I finalized the last ownership transfer documents. Everything was official, signed, notarized, filed. The Silver Elm restaurant was mine completely. My manager called me that Thursday. Miss Carter, regarding the anniversary party this weekend, should we treat you as the owner or as a guest? I smiled. Both. I briefed my staff carefully. They were to treat me like any other guest unless specifically asked. No special attention, no obvious deference. Just professionalism. Sam, my head waiter, grinned when I explained. This is going to be interesting, he said. I also called my accountant and lawyer, making sure every document was accessible if needed. I wasn't planning to embarrass anyone, but I wanted to be prepared. The day before the party, I stood in the restaurant after closing, looking around at what I'd built. The polished floors, the elegant lighting, the carefully arranged tables. This was mine. Whatever happened tomorrow, I'd earned this. Saturday evening arrived. I dressed carefully, nothing too flashy, but elegant enough for the occasion. I drove to the restaurant, my stomach fluttering with nerves. The parking lot was full. I recognized my relatives' cars, my parents' sedan, Evan's expensive sports car. I took a deep breath before walking inside. The private dining room glowed beautifully. My parents sat at the head of the table, both beaming. Relatives I hadn't seen in years filled the other seats. Evan stood near the bar, holding court with his usual confidence. He spotted me immediately, and his expression shifted to amused surprise. Lauren. Didn't think you could afford this place, sis. Several people laughed. I smiled politely and took my seat. My mother hugged me warmly. I'm so glad you came, honey. Wouldn't miss it, I replied. Dinner began with appetizers and wine. Evan dominated the conversation, talking loudly about his recent business deals, his new car, his upcoming vacation to Italy. He spoke with the confidence of someone who'd never truly struggled. I ate quietly, listening to my relatives praise his success. My aunt asked about my cafe, but before I could answer, Evan interrupted. Oh, the cafe. Is that still open, Lauren? I figured you'd have closed by now. It's doing well, I said simply. Really? He raised his eyebrows. That's surprising. Small businesses usually fail within the first year. You must be barely breaking even. His wife giggled. My mother looked uncomfortable. I'm managing, I replied calmly. Evan leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. You know, if you ever need career advice, I'm happy to help. Running a real business is complicated. Maybe you should consider going back to accounting. I sipped my water, saying nothing. As the main course arrived, Evan stood with his wine glass raised. Everyone quieted, expecting another toast. To Mom and Dad, he began warmly. 40 years of marriage is incredible. You've taught us the value of hard work, dedication, and smart decisions. He paused, glancing at me. You've taught us that success requires more than just dreams. It requires practical thinking, financial sense, and knowing when something isn't working. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother's smile looked strained. To success that lasts, Evan continued, not experiments that fail. Several people raised their glasses awkwardly. I raised mine too, meeting his eyes steadily. He looked satisfied, like he'd won something. I felt the familiar sting of his words but kept my expression neutral. Around me, waiters moved efficiently, refilling glasses, clearing plates. Sam caught my eye briefly, and I gave him a tiny nod. Not yet. The meal continued. My uncle asked Evan about his company's recent merger. Evan launched into a detailed explanation, using business terms to impress everyone. He loved being the center of attention, the family's success story. Meanwhile, I noticed the restaurant staff watching discreetly. They knew who I was. They'd seen me work myself to exhaustion for this place. They respected me in ways my family never had. Evan leaned toward me during dessert, his voice low enough that only I could hear. You know, Lauren, there's no shame in admitting you failed. Everyone makes mistakes. Maybe one day you'll learn how real business actually works. I looked at him calmly. Maybe. His condescension was familiar, comfortable for him. He'd spent years positioning himself as the superior sibling, the one with real ambition and intelligence. Tonight was just another opportunity to reinforce that narrative. What he didn't realize was that the ground beneath his assumptions had already shifted completely. Sam approached our table with a fresh bottle of wine. He moved smoothly between the chairs, refilling glasses with practiced efficiency. When he reached me, he paused. Ms. Carter, your manager mentioned the invoices are ready whenever you're finished with dinner. The table went completely silent. Forks stopped mid-air. Conversations died instantly. Every eye turned toward Sam, then toward me. Evan blinked rapidly, his wine glass frozen halfway to his mouth. What did you just call her? He asked slowly. Sam glanced at me, uncertain if he'd made a mistake. I gave him a reassuring smile. It's fine, Sam. I'll review them later tonight. Thank you. He nodded and moved away smoothly. The silence at the table stretched painfully. My mother looked completely confused. My father's eyebrows were raised. Evan stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Lauren, my mother said carefully, what was he talking about? I set down my napkin slowly, meeting each person's gaze around the table. The moment felt surreal, months of planning crystallizing into this single conversation. Sam is one of my staff members, I explained calmly. He was asking about business documents I need to review. Evan laughed, but it sounded forced. Your staff? Lauren, what are you talking about? I opened my purse and pulled out a folder I'd brought specifically for this moment. Inside were copies of the ownership documents, signed and notarized. I placed them on the table in front of my parents. I own the Silver Elm restaurant, I said quietly. Mr. Jennings sold it to me 3 months ago. The transfer became official last week. My father picked up the documents, his hands trembling slightly. He read the first page, then looked at me with wide eyes. Lauren, is this real? Yes, Dad. It's real. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears forming in her eyes. Evan snatched the documents from our father's hands, scanning them frantically. His face went from pale to red as he read. His wife leaned over his shoulder, her eyes widening. You own this restaurant? Evan repeated, his voice rising. You? This place costs a fortune to run. There's no way you. I've been managing it for 18 months, I interrupted calmly. Mr. Jennings trained me, mentored me, and eventually sold me the business when he decided to retire. I've increased profits by 40%, expanded the menu, and built a loyal customer base. I pulled out additional documents, profit reports, customer satisfaction surveys, press clippings about the restaurant's turnaround. The cafe you mocked? I continued. That's still running too. Successfully. I manage both businesses now. My uncle leaned forward, studying the papers. This is incredible, Lauren. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because I wanted to prove it to myself first, I replied honestly. I didn't need validation. I needed to know I could actually do it. Evan's face was bright red now. His wife touched his arm, but he shook her off. Around the table, relatives whispered to each other, glancing between Evan and me. My mother stood suddenly, tears streaming down her face. She walked around the table and wrapped me in a tight hug. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. So proud. My father joined her, his eyes wet. We should have believed in you sooner, sweetheart. The moment felt overwhelming. Years of doubt, dismissal, and mockery melted away in their embrace. But Evan wasn't finished. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. This is ridiculous, he announced. You're all acting like she accomplished something amazing. She got lucky. One wealthy man handed her a business. That's not success, that's charity. The table went silent again. Even his wife looked embarrassed. I stood slowly, gathering my purse. Dinner's on the house tonight, I said quietly. Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad. I'm glad I could host this for you. I left the dining room, walking through the main restaurant toward my office. Behind me, I heard raised voices, my father arguing with Evan, my mother crying, relatives debating loudly. I sat at my desk, breathing deeply. My hand shook slightly from adrenaline. Sam knocked softly on the door. That was intense, he said carefully. Are you okay? I think so, I replied. Thank you for following the plan perfectly. He grinned. It was my pleasure, Miss Carter. After Sam left, I sat alone in the quiet office, processing everything. I'd prepared for this moment, but the reality felt different than I'd imagined. Not triumphant exactly. More like closure. An hour later, as the party was ending, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Evan appeared in my doorway, his expression a mixture of anger and something else, maybe humiliation. Can we talk? He asked stiffly. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat heavily. For a long moment, Evan said nothing. He stared at his hands, his jaw clenched. You did this to embarrass me, he finally said. No, I replied firmly. I did this to build something meaningful. You embarrassed yourself by assuming I'd failed without ever asking how I was actually doing. He looked up sharply. You could have told me. The whole family. Instead, you let us think. Think what? I interrupted. That I was a failure? You didn't need my permission to think that, Evan. You chose to believe it because it made you feel superior. His face reddened again, but he didn't argue. Every family gathering, I continued, you mocked my cafe, my choices, my abilities. You never once asked if I needed help or support. You just laughed. It seemed like a stupid risk, he muttered. Maybe it was, I acknowledged. But it was my risk to take. And I succeeded despite your doubts, not because of your support. Evan stood to leave, then paused at the door. Marcus Webb's bistro got shut down last month. Health code violations. I nodded slowly, understanding his unspoken message. The sabotage attempt had backfired on his friend. Karma, I said simply. After he left, I locked up the restaurant for the night. Walking through the empty dining room, I remembered that first chaotic day 18 months ago. The broken equipment, the hostile staff, the overwhelming doubt. I'd turned it all around through hard work, intelligence, and determination. The same qualities Evan claimed I lacked. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, thank you for everything tonight. Your father and I would love to take you to lunch this week. We want to hear about your journey. We're sorry we didn't support you better. I smiled, typing back, I'd love that. The local newspaper ran a feature story the following week, from accountant to restaurant owner, Lauren Carter's inspiring journey. They interviewed me, Mr. Jennings, and several staff members. The article described my transition from corporate burnout to small business success. It mentioned the cafe, the restaurant, and my commitment to community building. The response was overwhelming: emails from aspiring entrepreneurs, interview requests, even a speaking invitation from the local business association. The restaurant saw a surge in customers. People came specifically to support the story they'd read about. Some asked to meet me, to hear advice, to share their own dreams of leaving corporate jobs. I felt genuinely happy for the first time in years. But there was an unexpected consequence. Evan's company launched an internal investigation into some questionable expense reports he'd filed. The newspaper article had caught his boss's attention, who'd started asking questions about Evan's claims of consulting on restaurant ventures. 24. 3 weeks after the anniversary party, Evan showed up at the restaurant late one evening. I was reviewing inventory when Sam told me he was waiting in the dining room. He looked terrible, exhausted, defeated. His usual confidence had evaporated. I need your help, he said without preamble. I gestured for him to sit. What happened? The company found inconsistencies in my reports. They're suspending me pending a full investigation. He ran his hands through his hair. Some of it is. I exaggerated some things. Lied about consulting work I never did. Used company resources for personal trips. I listened without interrupting. They saw the newspaper article about you, he continued. Started wondering why I'd claimed to be advising restaurant businesses when my own sister had actually built a successful one without my help. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I'm asking if you'll vouch for me, he said quietly. Tell them I helped you somehow. Your reputation could. No, I interrupted firmly. Evan's face crumbled. Please, Lauren. I know I've been terrible to you, but I'm desperate. I won't lie for you, I said, my voice steady. I won't destroy my credibility to cover for your mistakes. So you're just going to let me fail? He asked bitterly. You failed yourself, I replied. Just like I succeeded myself. Those are the consequences of our respective choices. He stood slowly, defeated. At the door, he turned back. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I mean that. I appreciate that, I said honestly. I hope you figure things out, Evan. I really do. But I can't compromise my integrity to save you from yourself. After he left, I sat alone in the quiet restaurant. My mother called later that week, thanking me for my grace in handling the situation with Evan. Apparently, he'd told them about our conversation. 2 months later, I hosted a small family dinner at the restaurant. My parents came, along with several relatives. Even Evan attended, subdued but present. His suspension had been lifted after he'd made restitution, though his position at the company was diminished. As we ate, my father raised his glass. To Lauren. You've taught us all something important about perseverance and believing in yourself. Later, as I locked up for the night, Sam smiled at me. You really showed them, didn't you? I considered the question carefully. No, I replied softly. I showed myself. The restaurant lights dimmed behind me as I walked to my car. Above the door, the sign glowed, the Silver Willow House, a community gathering place. I'd merged my cafe's name with the restaurant's, honoring both journeys. 2 dreams that had become one success story, built entirely on my own terms.